It's the Beaver Banter podcast for the second time this week. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined by my co-host Ian Rivers. And Ian, as we get ready to talk Beaver hockey, we're joined by Lucas of Beaver Territory. Lucas, welcome back to the podcast. How you feeling?
Good. Excited for this weekend. How are you guys?
Feeling pretty good?
Yeah, really good, man. I'm cautiously optimistic for this weekend. I'll put it that way.
So with Beaver hockey, first off, we'll just get this out of the way. Women's hockey played in the first round of the CCHA tournament over the weekend and played number one Ohio State, and they certainly played the number one team in the country, and they certainly played some hockey. Those games did not go the way of Bemidji State. Their season is officially over, and just looking at Bemidji State's season as a whole in women's hockey, I'm just going to put it out there. Is there any positives? Is there anything we can take from this season, Ian?
Um, I'll say this weekend. I mean, if you look at the other four games against Ohio State, these were by far the two most competitive. And I think that tournament hockey kind of can breed that competitive nature. Maybe Ohio State was kind of playing a little bit passive. But I mean, Bemidji State, I think in game 2 on Saturday scored in the third period pretty late with, no, OSU scored within the last 4 minutes to make it 2-0, and then a power play goal gave us a glimmer of hope with about 2.5 minutes remaining. But I mean, that's how close it was. It was 1-0 up until the last 5 minutes of the game. So I think if you're going to look at anything, you're going to look at those last couple of games and say, hey, look, I mean, we only had 3 seniors, I believe, on the roster. You never know what can happen. I know we have some more talent coming in next season, so I'm looking forward to next season because 5-30-1 I think will be pretty hard to beat in terms of you probably can't get any worse. So it should be interesting. I mean, especially when you consider that 2 of those wins came in the first 2 weeks of the year and the tie. Like if you start off the season 2-1-1 and then from there you only go 3-29-0, that's pretty rough. So definitely you just got to take with the positives from what you can. Getting off the snide late season against St. Thomas with that 4-1 victory, and then playing a competitive series against the number one team in the country. I think that's what you got to kind of build off of for next year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the best you can do for Bemidji State women's hockey is just kind of this year happened and move on to the next year, and that's pretty much all we have to say. Lucas, anything you have to add on women's hockey this year?
I would still give a big shout out to Hannah Hoganson, who started both games in net. Her Friday night game was really good, and she kept the Beavers in both those games against Ohio State. Definitely, some of her better performances of the season.
And now
Yeah,
moving
she had
on,
a crazy amount of save. What was it, like 41 saves on Friday night or
Something
something
like that, yeah.
That was a good game, yeah.
And now moving on now as we go into men's hockey, that's been the topic this weekend. The CCHA tournament begins. And Lucas, since you're our guest, we'll let you go first. What are you looking forward to in this matchup, and what does Bemidji State have to do?
I think the first thing you have to look at is just going to be the health of the team. Down to 10 forwards at times last weekend, losing Jackson Judding, early in the second period of the first game. It's really going to be, is Mitchell Martin able to play this weekend? Is Jakub Lewandowski, back to 100%? And I know he played Saturday and played some meaningful minutes. But, if we roll in with 11 forwards again, it might be a rough weekend. But, Bemidji State system does, play really well in the playoffs. They've had a lot of success in Marquette against Northern Michigan. I think I saw something 11-2-1, something like that. But really, yeah, I mean, they're going to need, Lleyton Roed in that top line to produce, but they're also going to need to find secondary scoring from someone. Yuri Väisänen, Caden Pickering, Carter Jones, those guys are going to need to step up and produce offensively as well.
Yeah, I brought it up that I think the defense, if the defense can do a pretty good job jumping into the scoring, we have not scored more than 4 goals on a lot of occasions this year. And when we do, it's a lot of times because Rosen and Zmolik particularly get up and jump in the offensive play, getting assists and goals themselves. I think who was it? Zmolik had a 4-point night on Saturday, or was that Rosen?
Rosen did.
Rosen. So
Rosen had 4 on the weekend. I don't remember if they all came Saturday or not.
Yeah, but either way, I mean, they were both on the score sheet quite a bit. Lleyton Roed, obviously, you feel like he's just bound to get his. He's one of the top options only as a freshman here for BSU's offense. So that's going to be particularly something to watch for, is how consistent can the offense be? Because even this weekend, against St. Thomas, it was pretty inconsistent. And Lucas, you kind of brought it up on Twitter, like what can you expect going into the game with only like two forward lines that have even played any ice time together, and then you're just kind of throwing out guys like Dante Lawson, who's I think only played like 6 games or 7 games this year. So it's tough being in that situation, especially against an improved St. Thomas team on the road, and a St. Thomas team who is still playing for positioning. They had a chance to jump them into sixth this weekend. They did not get it done, but yeah, I mean, it's tough being in the situation we were. Because now we're going on the road. And a lot of people I saw looking at that Bowling Green play or attempt on the empty net right there at the end of the game. And it very well could have been the difference between home ice in the first round against Northern Michigan. But, you got to bring up the fact that the Beavers kind of shot themselves in the foot on many, many occasions this year. And I mean, you take 2 or 3 of those games and turn them around and just get into overtime instead of losing in regulation, or winning in regulation instead of dropping it to overtime on just a couple occasions. And you're only 2 points off of not only home ice but third place, and that would be a date with, I think, the worst team in the CCHA in terms of their last 10 games. What were they, 2-7-1 in those games?
Yeah.
And it seemed like for a while Ferris State was maybe the hottest team in the CCHA. So that would be a much more appetizing matchup for the first round. But we made our bed. We kind of have to lay in it. Northern Michigan's been pretty hot. I mean, they just scored 17 goals a couple of weeks ago against Ferris State. Was that in Big Rapids? I can't remember. I feel like it was.
That was in Big Rapids.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so like that's pretty terrifying to have to go into Marquette. But like you said, we have pretty good success rate in Marquette. And we're built. Our play style is built. We touched on it with Beaver soccer earlier this year. We're kind of built to play in the tournament. And so hopefully that shows up this weekend. Because if you can get past this weekend, which they could, I mean, it's a winnable series. It's not like they're playing the Gophers or Michigan or somebody like that. So it's a winnable series. And then after that, it's a 1-game semifinal and a 1-game championship. So I think we've seen anything can happen in one game with BSU this year, even in those games against Tech where we lost. I mean, I think we played really well that weekend and didn't get anything to show for it. So it's going to be interesting to say the least. 6:07 Friday and 5:07 on Saturday, and then 5:07 Sunday if needed. And I feel like we probably will need that Sunday game. I just have a feeling most of BSU's playoff series, I feel like since they kind of changed to this format, have gone to 3 games, whether we're the favorite or not. So that's kind of a prediction.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you make that point of it's probably likely going to go to 3 games, but Bemidji State always likes to stretch it out just a little bit. How important is game 1? Obviously, you want to win the game that's in front of you, but if Bemidji State loses that first game, is it as good as done, or is it like, or will they be fine? What are you guys' opinions?
It's not. I mean, it would be really nice to have, obviously. I mean, he puts you on that front foot for the rest of the series, but Midges kind of always seemed to play a little slower on Friday nights. It seemed like this season, for me at least, it seems like the Saturday games are a little bit stronger. You look at the last time they traveled to Marquette, even, you lose the opener 2-0 and come back and win Saturday night 4-1. But in a playoff series, it's really important to get that game 1. You just are able to control the rest of the series, and especially with a shorthanded team. I mean, going 3 games and having less than 12 forwards available would be terrible.
Yeah, exactly. On the road too. Last year against Bowling Green, we did drop game 1 on Friday night and then came back and won both games 2 and 3, but that was at home in the Sanford Center in a much different environment. And so I think it might be the cop out answer, but I do think, like Lucas said, that first game in a playoff series on the road is going to be very crucial, especially if we are at all shorthanded in the forward department this week, to be able to get out in front and not have to say, well, we need 2 in a row, and we haven't really been a team that's gotten 2 in a row very consistently this year. So that's going to be difficult. That's going to be really difficult. But, I could see a lot of these series in the first round. It's really tough to sweep in college hockey. If you look across the CCHA, I mean, Minnesota State's not sweeping everybody, especially when they go on the road. Michigan Tech, I think, actually has been a better road team this year than home team, weirdly enough. If I remember them talking about that, I think it was on the CCHA show a couple of weeks ago or last week even. Because they were kind of breaking down that championship series between Mankato and them. But especially with how deep this league is this year, it's going to be difficult for all these teams in week 1 of the tournament. But especially for Bemidji, I mean, this has been an inconsistent team, and as mediocre as we've looked, if we can put together a weekend where we look the part the whole time, because I think even Friday night against St. Thomas, we had some good looks. We had some good chances. It's just like maybe the puck just didn't go in, or, I mean, their goaltender was playing pretty well as well on Friday night. And so if you get a couple more of those bounces, maybe you're looking at a different outcome for Friday. But
well, that kind of brings it to my next point here is Lucas, I know, has pointed out on Twitter before about the expected goals. And there's been a few series where Bemidji State has lost, and all of a sudden you look at the expected goals and it says Bemidji State should have beat them by 3 goals. And so, Lucas, is that inconsistent play? Is that the puck not bouncing? What exactly does that lead to? Is it just kind of the luck of the draw?
Yeah, it's a combination of a lack of execution, not putting away those high chance scoring chances, and running into hot goaltenders. I mean, you look at that Michigan Tech series, and that was all Blake Pietila. I mean, that was him just stonewalling the Beavers in those 2 games. Last weekend, I thought they did create quite a few good chances on Friday as well. Expected goals were pretty even. That game really changed when Jackson Judding went down, though, and you lost another forward. I mean, it seemed like the Beavers had the better of play. They gave up that goal with 17 seconds in, and then pretty much controlled play for the rest of the first period and into the second until that injury. But yeah, Trotter played really well all weekend or on Friday for St. Thomas, and yeah, was able to shut down the Beavers after that 1 power play goal.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting because I think I'm blanking on his name. The NMU goalie, he's been a little inconsistent as of late from what I've seen. Fans have been getting a little antsy with his play. But that's the thing. Like, BSU knows they have a talented goaltender, and even though Scholl, we've seen some inconsistencies in his play this year, tournament hockey can really turn on its head. Goaltending is maybe one of the most important things, because if you get a hot goalie, sometimes maybe all you need to score is 2 goals. You don't necessarily have to get 6 on any given night. And there's going to be games that are like that, I'm sure, in the tournament. But if you can get a hot goaltender, I think Scholl, if Scholl can show up and play to his truest form, and show those flashes that we saw from him last season, and even in spurts this year, we can have a decent chance to win this series. Because this is definitely an inconsistent offensive team. So hopefully, maybe it's Friday night that Scholl shows up and we win a 2-1 game. And then we win a 5-3 game on Saturday because the offense shows up. It's just going to have to be one or the other. And hopefully both of them do not falter at the same time.
So, yeah, if you look at what Scholl did last year in the playoffs, I mean, he kept everyone under 2 goals the entire time. He 2-1 lost open against Bowling Green, and then 2 goals allowed in a 4-2 win, 1 goal allowed, 2 goals allowed, and 2 goals allowed, and one of those coming in overtime in the championship game.
Goaltending
after like an hour rest.
Goaltending huge, and we've talked about that on the last podcast, Ian, about the importance of that, and also just looking at this series and how banged up Bemidji State has been. You guys have pointed to that over the last couple of weeks. The lines have just been getting rougher and rougher in terms of just the amount of bodies and the way that this season has gone. It's just been weird. Maybe is the right way to put it. We talked about expected goals not quite working out for the Beavers, a little bit of inexperience, a little bit of a mishmash, a little bit of kind of trying to figure out who they are after having some key departures from last season. And then now with the injuries, with all that in mind, is it hard to properly judge Bemidji State's success this season, especially later in the year? Or can we still call this team mediocre or a disappointment or whatever? Do the injuries and just some of that kind of expected versus actuality, how does that factor into judging this hockey team?
I know that Sartori has his whole next man up mentality, and it's true to a certain extent. I have to say the injuries do play a key role in that, because since that Minnesota State series where we went into Mankato and swept them, there's been a key injury offensively, like pretty much the entire way, whether it was Ross Armour to start, eventually Eric Martin going down, and those are like the two upperclassmen that we had that had actually had time here on campus, like coming into this season. So, and then now within the last couple of weeks, you just like are throwing darts at a board, hoping that guys are going to be ready to go. But I do like, there is some level of disappointment. I've been thinking about it. Like, you're in a spot on December 31st, like going into the new year, where you're tied for first in the CCHA with Michigan Tech with a game in hand. And now, 2 months later, you're on the road in the playoffs. And that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. But I do think that, some of the offensive, I don't want to make excuses for them necessarily, but some of the offensive woes have been because of that inconsistency with, oh man, this guy's out, tonight, and got to switch up the lines, and not having any line consistency is a big thing. It's a really big issue, especially with a lot of young players that haven't played together before. Well, I mean, they've played together plenty at this point, so that's not really an excuse too much at this anymore. It's more of just not having a full 12-man forward lines to throw out there. So I do think that there's something to say about the injuries, but it still is a little disappointing, especially because in so many of these games, even with the injuries, you feel like they just didn't get enough points on the weekend, and they deserve more from some of these results.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Ian said. It's slightly disappointing just because of all the points we've dropped along the way. That Lake Superior game that they had the 2-1 lead with a power play and under a minute to go. I think that's the loss I'm going to look back at the end of the year, and just that's the difference between home ice and a road trip this weekend. And there's just so many other examples too. Second weekend of the season, you drop you drop a point to Michigan Tech. You have them. You're going to sweep them. You're up 2-0, and you give up 2 third period goals to get a tie and then a shootout win.
Yeah, and it's like you go 2 weeks and there's another example. It's just how it's been. Ferris State, and then even the next weekend against Northern Michigan, that game was 0-0 until about 1:50 left in the game. And I don't want to say that every one of these is a game that you shouldn't be dropping that point in, because it's going to happen every once and then. And, we have stolen one of those points back against Lake Superior State. And then, the disappointing part was giving it back the next night on Saturday with a goal within the last 30 seconds of the game or whatever it was. So, yeah, I think it's just the consistency that it happened with this year, and the fact that you did finish only 2 points out of third place in the CCHA. And it's just those are the disappointing things that it's, it does feel like a little bit of a lost season. I think it's about where you would say, you told me coming into the year, we're picked fourth. We didn't have a lot of consistency. We lost a lot of offensive firepower from last year. You tell me we're going to finish fifth and we were right there to get a home ice game, our home ice weekend. I might have accepted it and said, yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. But the way that it kind of happened was a little disappointing.
Best thing is, though, now it's playoffs and none of that matters. You have a 3-game series in front of you, and you win it, and you go single elimination from there on out. So you still got an opportunity here.
That's kind of what happened last year. I mean, we had the same type of thing happen to us last season. We had a terrible run of 7 losses in a row or 6 losses in a row in January. Kind of got off the snide, because we played St. Thomas and swept them on the last weekend of the season, but it wasn't anything convincing. A couple of 2-goal wins or maybe a 1-goal win. I don't remember the exact score lines of those games. And then, you come out and win 2 out of 3 against Bowling Green and go in and upset Michigan Tech. And you're looking at the season like it's a success because you were one of the most controversial games away from getting into the NCAA tournament again. And so, I mean, like you said, it's playoffs. None of that matters now. Just get in and focus on your games this weekend and try to win.
And that's the interesting thing is last year with that tournament run and being this this close to getting into the NCAA tournament last season, we just forgot about how they ended the season. And I guess they have a chance to do the exact same thing again. What do they have to do to go on a deep tournament run? And if they do that, do we give them a pass for how they ended the season?
I think I do give them a pass if they do it, just because of the injuries that we talked about, like that sort of inconsistency. I might not give them a pass for certain games, like Lucas said, that power play goal. We're on the power play and giving up a goal in the last 2 minutes to Lake State. Some of that's like unacceptable in my mind, but the whole season would kind of be, you put a cherry on top if you can get back to the CCHA championship, and especially if you get back to the NCAA tournament. That's a success of a season in my eyes. But to get there, I think the defensive core, I'm going to keep hitting that point home. Smolik and Rosen are the experienced members of this team on the defensive side of the offensive zone, I guess. Ross Armour, I think he's got to step up. You're going to have to see it from these seniors. They don't want to go out having the last 2 months of the year that they have. I'm sure of that. So those 3 players, and I guess I'll throw Kyle Loft in there as well. How much can those guys step up? And then like Lucas said, will we see a guy like Carter Jones maybe have his kind of breakout, weekend? I think we've already seen some decent weekends from Carter. I'm not going to say that he hasn't shown up at all, but can he put his name on the map, score a goal on back-to-back nights and have a 4 or 5 point weekend? Can somebody do that besides Lleyton Roed? I think is going to be the main thing.
Yeah, the key to playoff hockey for me is always going to be goaltending. You need to have strong performances from your goaltender, and I think the Beavers will go as far as Scholl gets them. Coupled and then again, like you mentioned, secondary scoring. It's the key here for the Beavers to get some offensive production from players other than that top line.
So another move in another headline, I should say, in Beaver hockey, Lleyton Roed, I believe, named the CCHA Rookie of the Month for February. Just give you guys the floor here. How important has he been for Bemidji State? And the question that's in the back of everybody's minds, does he stay a Beaver given transfer portal shenanigans?
Probably. I would say probably. I'm never going to assume. I know I've brought it up before, being my pessimistic self. But
I think it's your Twitter handle now.
Yeah, the pessimistic voice of Beaver hockey. That's me. Yeah, I would assume that he stays. I'm not going to assume that anybody's going to leave until I actually see it happen, because I haven't heard anything telling me otherwise. There's no rumors that are floating around about it. So, but he's been absolutely essential, especially with how pitiful the offense has looked at times this season. He's been like the lone bright spot. And man, I mean, I remember him coming in. I don't know why he missed that first weekend of the season against Arizona State, but he came in against Michigan Tech and he was lights out from game one. Man, he was impressive to watch. Super quick, gets those breakaway opportunities, and a lot of times he's going to put it away. And that's been something that Bemidji has not had, is a lot of consistency in that area this season outside of Lleyton. So very good to replace the offense that we lost last year with the Cylinders both leaving, and Irulo as well. Those are 3 pretty important offensive pieces to try and replace. And Lleyton's doing the best he can to shoulder that load, even though he hasn't had a consistent number 2 step up. We've seen guys like Armour for a stretch there. I think it was it like the Northern Michigan series, like where he was actually kind of like stepping up, and he had 3 or 4 good games in a row. But he hasn't been quite as consistent as Roed has offensively. But he's been absolutely essential to this team, and he's gonna be it going forward. He's gonna be the offensive key piece for the Beavers.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be the first Bemidji State freshman to lead the team in scoring in at least a decade. He's tied for fifth right now in the conference in scoring with those 30 points. I mean, that's just production that you don't get out of freshmen typically in this league. You know, CCHA doesn't get those high profile freshmen usually. So it's been really awesome to see Lleyton just succeed right away.
And I guess that goes to the next question then, is how does Bemidji State build around Lleyton, and how do they get this team kind of going in the right direction? Lucas, I know you've been paying a lot of attention down the recruiting pipeline and seeing who Bemidji State has coming up. What does the future of Beaver hockey look like?
I think it looks bright. You know, the next couple of recruiting classes have some really good players, and you know, obviously we're going to be losing a lot of defense this next season, but I think with the four freshmen that we have right now that are playing really well on the blue line, and the couple of guys that we're going to be bringing in next year, you know, I wouldn't be too worried about some of those losses. Offensively, you know, you expect a Lleyton Roed, Yuri Weisen, and Adam Fleming line to continue to develop. You're going to bring in a top two scorer from the OJHL next season. Yeah, there's some really good pieces coming in next season and the year after. You also, you know, you probably will have to take advantage of the transfer portal again and find some fifth year players looking for a new home for a season or two, and get some production out of them as well.
Yeah, I think that could be big to get a fifth-year defender or something like that. Like you said, a lot of these guys are pretty young on the blue line, so maybe just getting another guy in there for 1 year stopgap kind of guy to help lead that defensive core would be something big, you know, until these guys can get some more minutes under them. Because like you said, they played pretty well, but they don't get the minutes because Zamolik and Rosen particularly just they're on the ice for half the game sometimes. So it's tough for them to get out there and get experience. But I think that could be pretty important. We seem to be scouring Scandinavia pretty well. I'm pretty sure like the last 5 or 6 tweets I've seen for Beaver recruits are like all from Sweden and Finland, Norway area. So that's good to see because I think that's one thing that the Bemidji State's been kind of taking advantage of is getting those European players when a lot of, you know, Minnesota is kind of picked clean by the time it comes to BSU. You know, you got 4 teams ahead of you, and then now a private school that's going to get their guys. So I think using the European market as best you can is something that's a benefit for them going forward.
Yeah, it's a really untapped market. There's a lot of good European Union players out there. Like you mentioned, we've got a couple Norwegians coming in, another Swedish player. You know, Jakub Lewandowski is the only Polish player currently in Division One hockey. You know, there's a lot of opportunities out there for finding some gems.
And now, as we kind of expand a little bit from the Beavers, and you mentioned St. Thomas, Ian, and there's a bunch of other stuff with some of these Minnesota schools here. But in terms of the CCHA tournament, what's a matchup besides Bemidji State's that you want to see what happens with over the weekend?
Literally every one of them. I mean, it's I don't know how many I would pick to be an upset. And I think we should just go through and kind of pick our series, you know, one by one. And I guess I'll start with BSU. I think that the Beavers can go through, and I'm going to pick them to win. You know, I'm going to be the optimistic voice of Beaver hockey right now. I think they'll win in 3 games. I think it's going to be an overtime winner on Sunday by Lleyton Roed. He's going to make his name known. If it isn't to anybody, God help you if you follow the CCHA and you don't know about him. But you know, I think that the Beavers can win that one. And then you look around the league. I'm looking at a absolute garbage fest between Ferris State and Bowling Green, and I really don't know who to pick there, man. They're like the 2 most inconsistent teams coming down the stretch. I think I got to lean Bowling Green because of the fact that they're at home. And I think Swankler is better than anybody that Ferris State can throw out offensively. So that's probably my pick there. And then might be a little boring because I think either of the other 2 series could go to 3 games, but I don't know that I trust either of the 2. It's not that I don't trust Lake Superior State or St. Thomas to win a series. I don't trust Mankato or Tech to lose a series in 3 games at home, especially with the goaltending of Pietila. And I mean, Mankato's been super hot the last 2 months of the year, coming down the stretch to take back that 6th CCHA regular season title in a row. So I think both of those teams will end up advancing. I was going to ask, Lucas, do the semifinals reseed if there were to be like 3 upsets in the first round?
They do. Yep.
Okay, so I guess root for that if you're a Beavers fan, just because of the prospect of potentially getting a home ice game. Like if somehow Lake Superior State does upset Mankato and Ferris State wins against Bowling Green, Bemidji State's at home and they would be playing Ferris State in the second round. So that's good. That's interesting. And I mean, even if one of those two teams gets upset, that means you're avoiding them in the second round, because right now you'd be going to Mankato, which I do think is kind of a benefit. I think I'd rather play Mankato than Tech in the second round if everything went chalk, besides the Beavers, just because of Pietola and because of the fact that, I mean, statistically look at it, we've taken 7 points from Mankato, including a 3-1-0 record, as opposed to a 1-2-1 record against Michigan Tech. So I think that kind of plays into the Beavers' favor. Not that I necessarily want to play either of them, but in one game series, I think I'd rather take my chances with Mankato if I had to.
Yeah, and I might eat this, but I don't think Keenan Rensier is a very good goaltender. I think that's a good matchup as well for the Beavers. If everything else goes to chalk and we get to go to Mankato, I would take that. I will say, Ferris State has had the upper hand on Bowling Green this year. I think they've won 3 of their matchups this season. St. Thomas gives Tech fits. I would not be shocked at all if St. Thomas upsets Michigan Tech.
That would be interesting. I'm all for it, man. I'm Tech hater number one. I think most people that know me know that's my rival ever since they kind of realigned the divisions and conferences.
I always root for chaos anyways, and last CCHA playoffs sure gave us a lot of chaos, especially towards the end. So I mean, let's hope for that again and just kind of see what happens. I think the chaotic factor would definitely play into the Beavers' hand.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. And hopefully we got more to talk about next week. It's going to be an interesting weekend. There's going to be a lot of good hockey to be played. It's a damn shame that so many of these games have to be played at the same time. And I understand why the scheduling is the way it is, but it sucks some nights where you're like, man, I'd really like to watch these other games, but I only have two eyes. I can only watch so much at once. And when you're trying to be glued so closely to the Beavers, and myself being a lifelong Gophers fan since a young kid, I want to watch them. And I'm going to be paying close attention to that Alaska Fairbanks series this weekend, because if the Beavers can't make it in, I'm hoping the Nanooks can sneak in. That's like the story of the season so far in my mind, is independent Alaska Fairbanks, old WCHA Alaska Fairbanks, potentially getting into the NCAA as an at-large.
Yeah, so I think wrapping this podcast up here, let's finish. Lucas, you're our guest here today. And where can people go check out your work at Beaver Territory, and what do you got for them to go check out?
Yeah, so we've got beaverterritory.com, where I have kept track of recruiting. You can find a list of all the current commitments for both the men's and women's hockey teams out there. I also try to write a series preview each week, previewing the series ahead. You can find me on Twitter at Beav Territory, BEAV, or on Facebook at Beaver Territory.
A lot of cool stuff Lucas is doing, following the Beavers and the recruiting, and just staying on top of this team and providing some coverage that you don't always get to see with the smaller program like Bemidji State. So it's really been fun. Really appreciate the work you do, Lucas, in doing that. And we've kind of talked about the last time you were on the podcast of growing kind of that little sect of Beaver fans online and kind of trying to pod up. And I really think this season, at least for me, maybe you guys don't have the same experience, but at least for me, I have seen all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, there's like people who are following Bemidji State hockey or just Bemidji State athletics. So it's been really fun to see kind of this community start to form.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I've kind of noticed the same thing. All of a sudden you start seeing the same names pop up on Twitter talking Bemidji State athletics, and it's awesome to see.
Ian, anything you want to add on that
Yeah,
community?
I agree. I mean, it's fun being able to go out and game nights and tweet about the game and get reactions and interactions with other fans that are consistently popping up. Like you said, it's the same names. You get to know people, and it's been fun being able to grow, and hopefully in seasons to come, it's even better.
This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast, joined by Lucas of Beaver Territory. Go check out his stuff as well. We had a podcast earlier talking about the men's basketball season ending in that heartbreaker against MSU Moorhead. You can check that out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts, as well as the Beaver Banter YouTube page. Thank you guys. Roll Beavs, and we'll see you next time.